part of this trip next week from the King and Queen of the Netherlands will be to deepen trade and business relationships. There's some major Dutch companies, Philips just being one of them, with large workforces in New York State.
Hi there, it's WAMC News Director Ian Pickus, and on this episode of the WAMC News Podcast, the Dutch are coming. A new chapter is about to be written in Albany's centuries-long history with the Dutch. The King and Queen of the Netherlands are coming to the capital region on June 12th to meet with the governor, local Dutch business leaders, and area young people. And for some perspective on the affinity between the Dutch and their former Fort Orange settlement, we're joined now by author and journalist Paul Grondahl. Grondahl has written extensively on the topic in books for the Times-Union and since taking over as head of the New York State Writers Institute. Paul, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ian.
So obviously, New York is no longer a colony, but how have the ties between Albany and the Netherlands lasted this long?
Yeah, it's amazing. 400 years. This is actually the 400th anniversary of the charter, the official recognizing the city of Albany. But before that, it was a Dutch trading post. Beaver was the coin of the realm in the 17th century. It was important for top hats and other European finery. And, the Dutch created Fort Orange and the trading post and traded with the Native Americans in this region and have stayed here really ever since. Look at our street names, look at our earliest Dutch settlers, look at the architecture of Albany and the surrounding region, certainly Schenectady, Troy, and you'll see the Dutch influence.
Talk a bit about the relationships growth during the 20th century. Namely, I think some people might not realize that Albany's Tulip Festival is an outgrowth of this. Yes.
So during World War II, the Dutch and the Netherlands were occupied by Nazi Germany, and Mayor Erastus Corning at the time took a leave from office, was an infantryman, and saw combat throughout that part of Europe. And when he came back, he really wanted to help these war-torn, formerly occupied cities, particularly a sister city, became a sister city, Nijmegen, which is right on the border with Germany. And it was the film A Bridge Too Far, where the 82nd Airborne came in and took that bridge and pushed the Germans back across and liberated the city of Nijmegen. And it was devastated for years of occupation and heavy bombing. And Albany took up a collection in 1947 and sent 300 tons, an amazing sense of goodwill from the people of Albany to help this war-torn city in the Netherlands, with the Mayor Corning kind of leading the effort. They sent building supplies, clothing, food, medical supplies, and that city always was grateful. And they sent creative tulips in thanking us. They didn't have much, actually, after the war, but they had tulips. And we planted them in Washington Park, and that became the Tulip Festival.
Now, you were there not long ago. I remember reading your dispatches. What was it like seeing the relationship from the other side of the water?
Yeah, what's amazing is the reverence with which they hold Americans, particularly the American military. There's a new bridge, a beautiful bridge spanning this river, where you could still see where 20 American paratroopers died, including a couple of young men from central and western New York. And in honor of that sacrifice, there's a bridge, this new span, probably opened 5 years ago, beautiful modern bridge. And every single night, 365 days a year, volunteers walk across that bridge in a solemn vigil. And as you pass each, 100 yards or so, these lights come on by motion detectors, and it's done at twilight. And I witnessed that, and it's extremely moving. And then to see the cemeteries around there that are buried with young men from our country, but also from England and the Allied countries. And the people who live around those cemeteries still volunteer and keep it meticulous, mow the lawn, weed, plant flowers. And it's now the 80th anniversary of that liberation. And there's a group coming from Albany over to its sister city, Nijmegen, this fall to commemorate that. You saw the D-Day celebrations taking place this week as well. But it's amazing to think about that passage of time and everything that's happened in the world. But this bond is still really strong between Albany and the Netherlands.
Why do you think it's so important to remember that history? Because I think it's probably fair to say, most people living in the former New Amsterdam or the former Beverwijk today are not Dutch.
Right. I mean, I think it's about international cooperation. Part of this trip next week from the King and Queen of the Netherlands will be to deepen trade and business relationships. There's some major Dutch companies, Philips just being one of them, with large workforces in New York State. There's a lot of trade back and forth with the Dutch. The Dutch can teach us a lot about canals and about dealing with rising sea levels. It's a remarkable country. The book, The Island at the Center of the World, Russell Shorto, really, encapsulates how the Dutch were the great kind of nation in the 17th century, and they set up this outpost here along the East Coast, certainly Lower Manhattan, all the way up to Albany and beyond. And they brought with them tolerance, diversity, and a lot of really great qualities that I think we can learn from today.
So I also want to talk about the physical layout of the city of Albany today. Some people might not know that we potentially would not have Empire State Plaza, the giant hulking state government office complex that replaced a neighborhood, if not for a visit by the current king's mother, right?
Right. So Princess Beatrix, this was 1959. Governor Rockefeller was the governor. And he gave her a tour through the city, and he had a beautiful open convertible. I think it was a Lincoln Continental. And the city was in pretty rough shape in that area that Bill Kennedy would call the gut, Green Street, South End. And, according to many journalists who were following him that day, he was very embarrassed, and he vowed to build something impressive in Albany, and the Empire State Plaza was the result. And the jury's still out whether it was a good thing for the city or not. It took 98 acres out of the center of the city. There's a great documentary called The Neighborhood That Disappeared. There's still, generations later, hard feelings about all the people and businesses and churches and schools that were displaced when they tore out the center of the city and built that, postmodern marble monument.
So I guess a slight word of caution while the Royals are here in a couple of days. Be careful what you show them because it could have some long-lasting effects. Yes.
I think, from the people that I know, and I've been to Nijmegen, our sister city, 3 times, and the woman who's really responsible for keeping this alliance going and strong is Anja Adriaans. She is the volunteer founder and leader of this group called Friendship Albany Nijmegen. She was a historian and researcher, was really delving into that period after the war and how the two cities became aligned. And she has done a lot she brought the mayor of Nijmegen here last year, Hubert Bruels, and she's made many trips back and forth and has kind of kept this going because in 1947, in addition to the food, there was this beautiful exchange of letters between young children in Albany and young children who had just survived the Nazi occupation in their city in the Netherlands. And I met a couple of those people who are now in their late 80s. When they were young kids, they wrote back and forth. And these kids from Albany gave up, their shoes, their boots, their winter coats to help these young kids in Nijmegen that had been devastated by the war. So it's got a beautiful story and message about resilience and about caring for each other and international cooperation that I think still resonates today.
And as I say, a new chapter will be written. We know that on the schedule is a visit by the Royals to the Schuyler Mansion in Albany to meet a new generation of young people. So, Paul, we're so grateful for your insights and your time. Paul Grondahl is the head of the New York State Writers Institute, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay, that does it for this episode of the WAMC News Podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, I'm Ian Pickus.